The side of my head, I did look like an alien. I won't go near hair dye ever again.
I just wanted to mutilate my body.
Hair dye is used around 100 million times in the UK each year, in salons and at home.
I think more people should be aware of the dangers of PPD, definitely.
I've been dyeing my hair for about 10 years on a regular basis, and I've never had any reaction like that before.
According to the Cosmetics Trade Association, each year 50 million boxes of hair dye are sold in the UK, and a further 45 million applications take place in the salon. More and more people are experiencing allergic reactions to hair dye, reactions which can be life-threatening. But very few people are aware of the health risks that dyeing your hair can carry. Paula is just one of many people who have ended up in A&E after experiencing an allergic reaction to a home hair dye.
I used the same hair dye for 5 years and then one day just become allergic to it. I went to bed that night and I thought my head's a little bit itchy, and then I woke up the next morning and that's when my forehead had gone and my eyes started swelling. Obviously I've got quite long hair and it's quite thick. It was actually dripping with I don't know what it was, so I assume pus or my skin trying to get rid of it. It was literally dripping like it was wet, where my body's trying to get rid of the chemical in my system.
Do you think the manufacturers care? Do you think they're aware of this problem?
I think they're aware, but I don't think they care. If they cared, they wouldn't put the chemical in their product, would they?
Paula is one of the 40% of women in the UK who regularly dye their hair. But it's not just hair dyes which are applied at home which can cause this kind of reaction. Salon hair dyes can also lead to reactions such as these. Denise had her hair dyed in her usual local salon, where she experienced a life-threatening reaction.
So I'm sitting there in the chair and the hair dye's just been on, I think it was like 4 or 5 minutes, a very short time. And I started to go red on my neck and the top of my chest, which is normally when you're starting to have an allergic reaction. And I noticed it got red really quickly. So I took a Piriton and I said, look, I think there's something wrong with this hair dye, you need to wash it off. So they tried to wash it off, which they did, but then you can't stop the reaction because once it started, that's it. And I said, I think you might need to call an ambulance because this looks like it's getting really serious. I started to have breathing problems. I could feel my tongue swelling, my lips swelling. And so I knew what an anaphylactic attack was, but I had no idea you could be allergic to hair dye.
What Denise was experiencing was anaphylaxis.
Anaphylaxis is the most severe form of allergic reaction. Anaphylaxis itself, the lowering of the blood pressure, people can become dizzy, feel faint. In the most severe cases, they can collapse, become unconscious, and occasionally, tragically, fatalities can occur.
Denise spent the next 3 days recovering from her allergic reaction.
I just thought, you know what? I don't want to ever have that happen to me again. It's not that important to have my hair dyed and risk, a possible reaction.
According to the Cosmetics, Toiletries and Perfumery Association, 60% of women and 10% of men dye their hair at some point. Hair colour is a big business. Most hairdressers' profits come from hair dye applications, and the sale of home hair dyes is worth an estimated £321 million a year. But few people are aware these dyes contain chemicals which can cause potentially life-threatening allergic reactions. In 2000, 38-year-old mother Narinder Devi died shortly after applying a Movida home hair dye made by Garnier. In 2011, 17-year-old Tabitha McCourt died from a suspected reaction to a home hair dye. And last year, 38-year-old Julie McCabe ended up in a coma and later died. She had also used a home hair dye. Julie McCabe's father, Keith Miller, contacted hair expert Brian Plunkett while searching for answers about his daughter's condition.
The parents were desperate. They didn't know anything about what happened to their daughter. They thought that I would have a secret to say, actually, I know what the problem is and she'll be all right. But it was too late for that.
These types of reactions are very rare, But Brian believes allergies are increasing as more people regularly dye their hair from a younger age.
It was only ever used by the older person to cover grey hair. But of course, suddenly fashion's changed. And over the last 15, 20 years, young people are using it all the time.
Allergies like these can happen in the salon or using a home hair dye kit. Although the reaction that Julie McCabe suffered from was extremely rare, leading dermatologist Dr. Ian White suggests that they are not that uncommon.
Contact allergy to hair dye chemicals is remarkably common. That's not what industry would like to hear, of course, but industry knows.
It seems a chemical called paraphenylenediamine, commonly known as PPD, and a close relative called PTD, are the main causes of the vast majority of hair dye allergies, as Dr. Ian White explains.
PPD is generally used as the marker for permanent hair dye sensitivity, and it's a pretty good marker actually. The majority of people who have hair dye allergy will react to PPD.
The use of PPD is legal under EU law for use in hair dye, although it is banned for use in any other cosmetic product. It's found in 99% of permanent hair dyes and is responsible for fixing the colour to the hair shaft.
Paraphenylenediamine, PPD, is actually an unreactive substance, but it is very easily oxidised, and that some of the oxidation products can then react chemically with skin proteins, and that's the first step into producing skin allergy.
The Cosmetics, Toiletries and Perfumery Association say that around 1.5% of the population is potentially allergic to PPD. But Dr. David Basketta explains how the statistics are somewhat uncertain.
I remember talking to somebody who was long associated with hair dye manufacture many years ago, who said to me that he thought 5 to 10% of hair dye users eventually develop some kind of hair dye allergy. I always felt that that was a somewhat considerable exaggeration. I think over the years I've come to realise that perhaps it is not that high, but it's certainly not the 1 in 100,000 or 1 in 10,000. I rather think it's at the percent level.
This means that around 7 million people in Europe are potentially allergic to hair dye, who may experience a range of allergic reactions.
The reactions can vary from relatively mild, a bit of itch, a bit of redness, to the extreme where the skin is extremely red. It may swell enormously, and in fact you can end up with, if you like, a sort of a Michelin man or Michelin woman type of picture, and swelling in the throat as well. People can be extremely poorly, extremely ill with these reactions.
The crucial thing here is that this isn't an allergy you're born with. Even people like Paula and Denise, who have been dyeing their hair for many years, got this allergy because they developed it.
We're not born with allergy. There's the acquisition of allergy to a chemical from exposure to it. One can acquire allergy from first use, but more commonly it's after many uses, and in the majority of people, of course, they never acquire the allergy to it. And at the moment we have no way of predicting an individual's susceptibility.
PPD is regulated by the European Commission under the Cosmetic Products Directive. In 2010, the EU reduced legal PPD levels to 4% after concerns were raised about its safety. However, PPD in hair dyes had previously been banned in several European countries. During the 20th century, it was banned in Germany, France and Sweden after allergic reactions to PPD became such a serious problem. But it's now legal across Europe under EU legislation.
I'm looking at some research carried out last year by the EU Scientific Committee for Consumer Safety. It describes PPD as an extreme contact allergen. And more worryingly, it concludes that the continued use of paraphenylenediamine in hair dyes remains a considerable concern for consumer safety. So why isn't this chemical banned?
I'm here at the UK office of the European Commission. I'm going to meet with Jacqueline Miner, who's their representative. She's not an expert in this field, but has agreed to meet with me on the condition that I only ask this pre-arranged list of questions. In light of the SCCS's findings that PPD is an extreme contact allergen, does the European Commission still believe that the use of PPD is safe in hair dye?
We believe it's safe in accordance with the rules that we've laid down for its use. There is an issue for a very small proportion of the population in relation to an allergic response, and that is addressed by way of warnings on the packaging and instructions for use.
Industry guidelines stress that an allergy alert test must be conducted at least 48 hours before each hair dye application. This must be done whether in the salon or at home, even if you've used the hair dye before. This consists of putting a small amount of hair dye onto your skin to see if you experience a reaction.
The ingredients in the hair dye are covered by EU cosmetic law very stringently. Before even a product goes on the market, it has to be tested and it has to be deemed to be safe. Each individual manufacturer has its own individual instructions, both on the box and on the actual product itself. So, and as long as those instructions are adhered to, there shouldn't be any problems.
But it seems that these guidelines are not being adhered to by individuals and salons. Lib Dem MP David Ward raised his concerns over this in the House of Commons last year.
The response when we challenged the companies about this, they say it's there for everybody. Everybody knows about this. It's clearly visible if you go on to the website. It's always made very evident, and if they simply are careful and abide by the rules, there'll be nothing to worry about. But that clearly is not the case.
I'm here in central London to find out how many people carried out a patch test before dyeing their hair. Did you do a skin test?
No, I didn't.
And why didn't you do a skin test?
I don't know really. I had dyed my hair a lot in the past, and when I was about 13 or 14 the first time I did it, and then I did do the skin test, and I thought, okay, that's fine, we'll just carry on.
Skin test, no, because I'm familiar with the brand I use.
Yes, I do dye my hair, and yes, the hairdresser asked for a patch test.
Never.
You've never done a patch test. Why haven't you done a patch test?
I don't think I need it. Not necessary. I'm always good with the dye, so I guess I'm okay.
Awareness of the need to do a patch test is clearly a problem. Many people seem completely unaware of the safety risks of not testing yourself for allergy. But solicitor Greg Almond has represented many clients who have suffered allergic reactions to PPD, despite following the instructions.
A patch test seems as though it's a fail-safe guarantee that if you have a reaction to the patch test, then you don't use the product. But a number of clients have come to me and said, I definitely did the patch test, I waited the 48 hours and I've still suffered a reaction.
Solicitor Greg Almond points out that big hair dye manufacturers would rather give people compensation than face scrutiny over their use of PPD.
Manufacturers will look at the economics of these issues, and they will investigate the claims that are put forward, and obviously some of those claims are highly sensitive, and so they'll want to deal with them in a confidential manner.
One of Greg's clients, Emma, suffered an allergic reaction to PPD after having her eyebrows tinted, despite carrying out a patch test.
I put the patch test on and everything was fine, so a few days later made the appointment to go along, had a lovely time. Saturday morning, woke up looking like I'd been in the boxing ring with Mike Tyson, totally swollen, totally shocked, panic set in. My tongue, I noticed when I was panicking that my tongue felt funny. It was like it was too big for my mouth. Really, really scared. Called a family member who came and picked me up, took me straight to the hospital. Got seen to straight away. As the days progressed, the swelling got worse and worse and worse, and it moved down my face, started to block my airways. I was kept on tablets for a long time. I was taking tablets, 26 tablets a day. My eyebrows weren't really eyebrows, they were just pure blisters, weeping blisters that wept for a few weeks afterwards. I was waking up in the morning with my face stuck basically to the pillow. Obviously these were like thick orange red scabs. Gradually the scabs sort of started coming off, but it was pulling all the hair out. It was awful. And with my young daughter as well, it was just, she just didn't know what was going on with my face, you know. To have a reaction after the patch test just made me so angry. It's just, I just couldn't believe it.
PPD should only be used on hair, on the head, and that's really, it's only for use really. And although there are recommended guidelines for age, a 12-year-old could go and buy this product from any well-known retailer.
Greg points out that home hair dye kits have a problem with their packaging, as the labelling is often unclear.
It's not exactly user-friendly, and we think it should be much more user-friendly.
Looking at this box of hair dye, it's easy to see that I don't know what most of these chemicals even are. There's so many of them, they're on the bottom of the box, and the font is really small.
If you compare it to cigarettes, where it is very, very bold, there is no two ways about it. It tells you very, very directly what the hazards and what the risks are in very bold language, and maybe that ought to be the case with some of these dyes as well.
Whilst there is no legal obligation for users of home hair dye kits to carry out a patch test, salons have to conduct a patch test under Section 3 of the Health and Safety at Work Act.
Manufacturers have a protocol which should be followed. If it's not followed, you're opening yourself up to potential problems. If the industry was as a whole more regulated, then the hairdresser would be under a greater obligation to make sure that if you walked into a salon and you said, I want to have my hair dyed, that they carry out that sensitivity test.
According to the CTPA, hairdressers should be carrying out patch tests for every single application of hair dye. I'm going undercover to go into salons to see just how many of those hair salons offer me a patch test before agreeing to colour my hair.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could make an appointment next week for a hair colour.
Colour?
Yeah.
When?
Like Wednesday or Thursday.
Alright. You don't need an appointment, you can do it right now.
I can either give you a skin test today, or you can sign off on the day saying that you consent to not having a skin test, only because you might be allergic, so it's completely up to you.
You need to have a skin test then, just to use our own brand of colour.
Well, you've got colour on there already, so
Okay, great. So it looks like some salons are offering patch tests and some aren't. But what was most surprising here was the lack of consistency. Clearly some salons didn't understand or know that patch tests must be carried out at least 48 hours before every single application of hair dye.
Angela Hill has been a hairdresser for 25 years and explains the safety difficulties that the hairdressing industry is facing.
Why aren't some hairdressers patch testing, do you think?
Practicalities, really. The practicality is somebody coming 48 hours prior a tint isn't realistic for some people. And also you suffer the fear that if they don't get it done at your salon, they might go to a salon down the road that will.
For hairdressers like Angela, it's not just her customers she has to worry about. One of the main groups who are at risk of experiencing side effects of repeated exposure to PPD are the hairdressers themselves.
For most hairdressers, they would actually be practicing good practice, and that's using their PPE, which is their personal protective equipment, and they would be wearing gloves. For those that don't, the risks are that they would be probably suffering with a condition called contact dermatitis, and if it's that severe, it could end a person's career.
For hairdressers, of course, there are a whole range of risks, partly because they're being exposed to hairdressing products much more frequently than a consumer is exposed.
But as our secret recordings show, not as many hairdressers are aware as Angela about the risks to hairdressers and consumers.
The Department for Business Innovation and Skills is responsible for UK legislation surrounding the safety of cosmetics. I asked them whether anything was being done to ensure regulation in the hairdressing industry and knowledge of the potential dangers of using PPD. Nobody would meet with me here today, but they did tell me in a statement that patch testing may not take place every time someone dyes their hair, but the warnings are there and people may or may not heed to them. However, we would stress that the vast majority of hairdressers are aware of PPD. But are
study and survey seem to find quite the opposite. Patch tests may be one way of pre-warning consumers that they are sensitive to PPD. However, it seems these carry their own risks of sensitisation.
The anomaly that we have, of course, is that industry recommends so-called self-testing with hair dyes before use. Now, this is not enshrined in European legislation. And in fact, in European legislation, these substances are for application to the hair only, and specifically not to the skin.
Research conducted by the EU Scientific Committee of Consumer Safety in 2007 concluded that the risk of active sensitisation from routine diagnostic patch testing with PPD is considered to be unacceptably high.
There is no doubt that applying these substances deliberately to the skin on a regular basis does pose a threat to your health. The European Commission has chosen to ignore this for the present time, and so has the European Commission's legal advisors as well, because nobody knows what to do about it.
I pose these claims to the European Commission.
There is, of course, a scientific argument that by applying a product to your skin, an allergenic product to your skin, you are sensitising yourself. This is something that we are looking at with the industry, and I know that the industry is also discussing within itself how it can better assist consumers.
So it's okay for now that it contradicts your other legislation?
It's not ideal for certain, but it's always a question of what is best for the consumer, what is the best way to protect the consumer. The judgment currently is not to forbid patch testing.
I also asked the CTPA why they still recommend hair dye users carry out a patch test.
There is a risk that the allergy alert test recommended by the industry could sensitise someone to PPD. However, our experts believe that because the concentration of PPD in hair dyes is restricted, the risk is small.
But it's not only through exposure to hair dye which can sensitise you to PPD. Having a black henna tattoo carries a high risk of becoming sensitised to the chemical.
There's been, let me say, a fashion for having black henna tattoos, and there, to achieve the black coloration, people have adulterated or added PPD, often at several percent, to the henna to give you a black coloration. Then you're not only having skin contact, but you're actually punching the thing through the skin, so you end up with a reservoir of the chemical that's a problem in your skin. So the risks of developing the allergy are then very much higher.
Julie can no longer use most hair dyes because she became sensitised to PPD after having a black henna tattoo.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. Come in.
I went on holiday about 13 years ago and decided to have a henna tattoo. I'd never had a henna tattoo before, and I had it at the top of my thigh. Day 3, my skin started really itching. It was really red, and the redness became worse, and my legs started to swell. By the following day, my leg would bubble, and I could watch the skin bubbling. It would blister. The burning sensation was immense. I just wanted to mutilate my body.
The use of PPD in henna tattoos is illegal. They contain dangerously high concentrations of the chemical, which can lead to cross-sensitisation. This means the next time you dye your hair, you have a much greater risk of having an allergic reaction. This is something I didn't realise myself when I got a black henna tattoo whilst on holiday last year. Like Julie, I thought black henna tattoos were harmless. I'm going to one of our own holiday locations, Brighton, to see what henna should really look like.
Henna, of course, causes an ochre, a sort of a rust-coloured staining of the skin. These products that people have in the holiday resorts are black.
So if PPD is banned in makeup and in henna tattoos, why is it not banned in hair dye?
There is a level of consumer acceptance of the product, and there's a growing, really significant consumer desire for the product, not just in the UK and other European countries, but globally.
Some people have claimed that the main issue here is that there is no alternative to PPD because it's needed to bond the hair colour to the hair.
If a company, especially one of the bigger ones, could generate a substance which delivered the kind of hair dye performance that consumers want, but avoided the problems, then they would be marketing it in a heartbeat if it was commercially viable.
There are hair dyes available which are branded natural or organic, but these are often more expensive, and some still contain small amounts of PPD or PTD, which are needed to permanently cover grey hair.
So I've come to Notting Hill to meet with hairdresser Daniel Field.
He believes that PTD is much safer than PPD.
Again, it's the dye ingredient, and it's mostly used for the colours from lightest brown to black, and so is PPD. So PPD and PTD sounds the same, not the same substance.
PTD is a close relative of PPD. People who are allergic to PPD may find that they are also allergic to PTD, as Julie Muir found out when trying to find an alternative.
I did a skin test and was extremely pleased that I did, because within a really short period, my arm had bubbled all around here, the skin had blistered, it was really red, it was really burning. And the skin test, I literally dabbed a bit with a cotton wool bud, so I hadn't put a big blob on. As far as I was concerned, I bought the product and it didn't contain PPD. I was hoping that it would be safe for me.
Julie's skin test revealed that she had an allergy to PTD as well as PPD. Experts advise that if you're allergic to one, you should be cautious when using the other.
People who are sensitised to PPD or PTD, the evidence shows there's about a 90% cross-reactivity. So I think if you're sensitised to one, your chances of reacting to the other are really very high.
Without any alternatives to PPD, Dr. Ian White believes that the power of consumer demand outweighs the risk of using the chemical.
Bluntly, it's commercial.
In terms of like PPD is cheap to manufacture?
No, what I'm saying, it's profit. It's profit, because if PPD were a new substance being introduced onto the market, it would not be permitted.
Dr. Ian White suggests that the cosmetics industry has a key role to play in why the European Commission continues to allow the use of PPD.
We have DG Sanko, European Commission, Director General for Consumer Safety and Health Protection. What are they doing about this? Well, I can tell you what they are doing about it. They are depending on the advice at the moment from industry. So DG Sanko has asked industry to develop an industry standard for the self-testing of hair dyes.
The European Commission itself denied the claims that the industry influences their decisions concerning PPD.
Industry is a regular visitor to DG Sanko. I don't think we would deny that. What we do believe is that if you can have a self-regulatory initiative which meets the needs of both industry and consumers, so we have very clear criteria for self-regulation. It's not just something that the industry cooks up amongst itself. They have to have had a kind of participative discussion process. If everybody can come to an agreement as to the best way forward, then that's better than imposing something from the Commission. But I've never heard of the industry proposing something and us putting a Commission letterhead on it. That just doesn't happen.
Despite the concerns of Dr. Ian White and of David Ward, there are currently no plans from the Department for Business nor the European Commission to improve regulation or raise awareness about the potential risks of PPD.
The Department of Business's lack of urgency has frustrated MP David Ward, who is now urging people to come forward to raise awareness of the problem.
If we can find out the scale of this, then we can probably carry far more weight when we are then campaigning with the government itself.
It's really frightening that people aren't aware of the dangers.
I'm just so grateful I woke up and managed to get help.
It's not just that you're going to get swollen and look funny, it can kill you.
Although severe cases like Paula, Denise and Julie McCabe's are rare, anyone can become sensitised to PPD. People who dye their hair regularly, and particularly people who have had henna tattoos, are more at risk.
If hair dyes were new, and if they were assessed in the way that we do assess them now, then many of the hair dye chemicals would not be introduced onto the market.
Despite various cases of PPD allergies coming to light and calls from various professionals for immediate action, there are currently no plans to make hair dye use safer. One thing that is certain is that there needs to be more awareness about the potential dangers of using hair dye. Until the EU act on these potential dangers, hair dye remains a considerable concern for consumers.